An unprecedented storm is rattling the gilded cages of the British monarchy as explosive assertions from Tom Bower and Lady Colin Campbell cast a dark shadow of doubt over the carefully guarded narrative of Meghan Markle and Princess Lilibet. Behind those polished press releases and pristine public relations campaigns, palace insiders whisper that the true story remains buried deep beneath the surface. What makes this truly shocking is the quiet rumor that Prince Harry himself might have been kept entirely oblivious to these pivotal details. Could this single revelation shatter the carefully constructed illusions we have been sold? What is your take on this? Are we witnessing the exposure of a deep royal secret, or is this merely the spark for another media firestorm? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below. If you live for the raw truth behind the velvet curtains and the inner workings of the House of Windsor, hit that subscribe button right now. Truth is an unstoppable force. Long before those tell-all books landed on store shelves, the real warfare was already raging in absolute secrecy. Both Tom Bower and Lady Colin Campbell reveal a staggering reality. Some of the most dominant players on the global stage genuinely believed that infinite wealth, high-priced lawyers, and elite social networks could permanently lock an embarrassing truth away from the public. Time and time again, that arrogant assumption has blown up in their faces. But how did they get caught in their own trap? Let's look at the blueprint. The true fascination of these explosive showdowns lies not in the raw allegations themselves, but in the frantic defensive maneuvers they trigger. Bower never built his forensic investigations on shaky foundations, single anonymous whistleblowers, or fleeting internet gossip. Instead, he spent years meticulously threading together hard documentation, cross-referenced statements, and undeniable historical records. By the time his targets realized the gravity of the trap closing in, the evidence was already set in stone. Lady Colin Campbell has frequently pointed out a classic fatal flaw: elite figures consistently fail to realize that their aggressive defense strategies are exactly what seals their fate. Instead of letting a minor scandal blow over, their frantic counterstrikes turn a spark into a massive inferno. The harder they fight to bury the narrative, the brighter the spotlight shines on it. In trying to extinguish the smoke, they inevitably expose the fire. Look at history, the pattern is absolutely undeniable, starting with the spectacular fall of Robert Maxwell. At the absolute peak of his global dominance, he controlled a massive media empire and held keys to the highest political offices. Yet, the moment independent investigators began pulling at the loose threads, his response degenerated into a desperate, highly personal counteroffensive. Under mounting pressure from every conceivable angle, the conflict grew so intense it captivated the entire globe. Then came the ultimate twist in 1991, Maxwell's sudden, mysterious death off the deck of his luxury yacht turned a corporate scandal into a chilling international thriller. The aftermath was catastrophic. His business empire collapsed overnight, massive pension fraud came to light, and thousands of working-class families paid the ultimate price for his deception. This exact hubris claimed others too. Richard Branson took the fight directly to the courtrooms, confident that high-priced litigation would shield his public image. Instead, those legal battles only dragged his secrets into the open, creating a permanent public record he could never erase. Meanwhile, Conrad Black, whose vast influence spanned multiple continents, learned the hard way that owning newspapers and hosting political elites means nothing when paper trails start talking. His eventual prison sentence served as a devastating final chapter to a saga he swore he could suppress. The bigger the crown, the harder they fall. For both Bower and Lady Colin Campbell, this cycle is as predictable as the tides. Repeatedly, high society players armed with endless cash, crisis managers, and powerful networks have attempted to crush independent investigations. Yet, their very desperation to suppress the truth becomes the ultimate proof of their guilt. The real story here is not merely the secrets unearthed, but the absolute panic of those in power when they realize they have lost control of the steering wheel. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex seemed completely untouchable, wrapped in a protective armor of global celebrity, media partnerships, and a highly synchronized public image. But what shocking details were Tom Bower and Lady Colin Campbell digging up away from the cameras? Why do they believe the official royal fairy tale is missing its most critical chapters? The answer lies in a strategy that was designed to fail. Let us dive straight into the heart of the investigation. The Sussexes appeared to hold all the cards. With elite legal armies, global media networks, a devout fan base, and a carefully curated brand, they had built what seemed like an impenetrable shield around their personal story. Most observers assumed anyone daring to challenge their narrative would be instantly crushed by the machinery. Yet, what neither their allies nor their enemies saw coming was that two of the most relentless royal commentators, Tom Bower and Lady Colin Campbell, were quietly dissecting details far beyond the superficial drama of the daily tabloids. By the time the world caught on, the heavy lifting was already done. Records had been verified, testimonies weighed, and deep-cover sources locked in. While the global media was distracted by public bickering and cross-Atlantic mudslinging, a far more dangerous set of anomalies was surfacing in the dark, discrepancies that could not be brushed aside as cheap tabloid fodder. The spark that ignited this tinderbox occurred on a chilly Halloween morning in October of 2022, during a live broadcast of Good Morning Britain. Audiences expected the usual superficial royal chatter. Instead, Tom Bower unleashed a wave of unshakable assertions, speaking with the absolute authority of a man holding a winning hand. Under intense questioning from the hosts, he refused to take a single step back. Instead, he systematically dismantled the Sussexes' public narrative, pointing out specific, glaring falsehoods with absolute precision, demonstrating the utter confidence of an investigator whose receipts are bulletproof. The footage went viral globally within hours, dividing audiences instantly. Supporters of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle cried foul, calling it a toxic smear campaign, while their fiercest critics cheered it as a long-overdue reality check. Yet, both camps missed the forest for the trees. According to Bower and Lady Colin Campbell, the real seismic shift was not about television ratings or PR skirmishes. The true bullseye of their investigation had landed on a far more delicate target, the official story of Princess Lilibet. Baffling discrepancies regarding her name, her official titles, her christening, and the highly restricted flow of information surrounding her life were beginning to raise serious red flags. Individually, these anomalies seemed trivial. Put together, they formed a chilling puzzle that demanded immediate answers. These were not questions that could be silenced with a cease and desist letter or a slick PR campaign. They struck at the very core of a multi-year narrative. And as Bower continued to connect the dots, a starkly different reality began to emerge, one far more complex than the public was ever meant to see. But the real controversy was only just beginning. For nearly a century, one deeply sacred, intensely personal royal moniker was kept strictly within the late monarch's inner circle, completely shielded from public exploitation. What happens, then, when that highly protected name is suddenly blasted across global headlines in a birth announcement? Why did this specific choice ignite a quiet war behind palace walls? And what critical detail do Tom Bower and Lady Colin Campbell believe the world completely missed? Let's dissect the shocking truth behind the name. Some secrets are meant to be kept forever. There are names broadcast to the world daily, and then there are names so intimate they represent the absolute inner sanctum of a family. For decades, one specific name remained locked in the private heart of the British royal family. Yet, when that name was suddenly claimed in a global press release, it triggered a wave of shockwaves that refused to settle to this day. What caught the attention of our investigators was not merely a choice of name, but the shifting explanations, the glaring contradictions, and the deafening silence that followed. During a British television broadcast, Bower made it clear he was not chasing cheap headlines. Decades of unmasking elite scandals had taught him that the loudest truths are often found in what people refuse to say. The epicenter of this clash was Lilibet, the deeply personal childhood nickname of Queen Elizabeth II. This was not a public title, it was a sacred term of endearment reserved solely for her late husband, her parents, and a tiny handful of loved ones. It survived decades of intense media intrusion, remaining one of the few pieces of the late Queen's soul that the public never owned. Then, in June of 2021, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle announced the arrival of their daughter, Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor. Rather than uniting the family, the announcement triggered a quiet civil war. The BBC reported that the Queen had never been asked for her blessing to use the intimate name. Palace insiders stood firmly by that report. The Sussex camp fired back with equal fury, insisting the monarch had been consulted and had warmly given her approval. Two completely irreconcilable realities existed at the exact same time. For Bauer, this flat-out contradiction was the real smoking gun. The burning question was not just about permission, it was about why this friction exploded when it did, and why the shadow of that stolen nickname still looms so heavily over the House of Windsor. 5 years later, a story that should have been buried in the archives continues to haunt the royal family. Why did a simple, affectionate birthday post blow the embers of this old feud back into a raging fire? And what profound hypocrisy do Tom Bauer and Lady Colin Campbell believe is still hidden in plain sight? Do not go anywhere, because the threads of this mystery are finally starting to untangle. The debate refuses to die. What was supposed to be a quiet family milestone continues to fuel intense skepticism across the royal landscape. When Meghan Markle posted a warm tribute for her daughter on the 4th of June, 2026, celebrating Lilibet turning 5, the post looked picture-perfect on the surface. Yet, the instantly locked comments section told a completely different story. To seasoned observers, those disabled comments were a glaring admission that the toxic debate around her name has never truly been resolved. Lady Colin Campbell has highlighted a massive paradox at the very center of this saga. At the exact moment Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were branding themselves as progressive trailblazers breaking free from the shackles of the British monarchy, they chose to brand their child with the most private, traditional symbol of the Queen's inner circle. To royal watchers, that choice is completely incompatible with the anti-royal narrative they had spent months selling to global audiences. The timing made the hypocrisy even more glaring. After turning their backs on royal duties, fleeing to California, and launching high-profile media attacks detailing how they felt abandoned and trapped, the couple seemed dead set on burning their bridges. Their public stance was absolute: they were moving on. Yet, critics argue that placing a deeply personal royal stamp on their daughter proved they were desperate to keep one foot firmly in the royal door. This tension reached a boiling point during the Platinum Jubilee in June of 2022. London was the epicenter of the world as the globe celebrated 70 years of Queen Elizabeth II's historic reign. Amid the grand military parades, Harry and Meghan arrived with their children, creating the ultimate media circus. The reported meeting between little Lilibet and her iconic great-grandmother carried immense emotional weight. To the public, it was a heartwarming image of reconciliation. But behind the scenes, palace officials reportedly saw a different agenda. According to sources analyzed by Bauer and Lady Colin Campbell, the visit was viewed not as a spontaneous family reunion, but as a calculated PR maneuver staged during the most historic royal event of the century. Whether fair or not, that perception cemented the controversy. And that is why, half a decade later, the ghost of that name still refuses to leave the conversation. When Lilibet Diana stood beside her historic great-grandmother during the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, the world saw a sweet family moment. But why did those private encounters later take on such an explosive significance? How did the passing of Queen Elizabeth II transform simple family snapshots into highly contested pieces of royal property? And why did these images become so dangerous to palace control? Let's unpack the hidden details. When Lilibet Diana met her great-grandmother during the Platinum Jubilee of Elizabeth II, almost no one realized how loaded those moments would become. The images went global, capturing a rare family connection. Yet, just a few months later, the passing of the Queen turned those simple photographs into priceless historic relics. Suddenly, they were no longer just family memories, they represented the final, tangible link between the late monarch and the great-granddaughter named after her private self, a powerful piece of royal branding preserved completely outside the palace's jurisdiction. Tom Bower points to what followed as one of the most hypocritical turnarounds in modern royal history. For years, the Sussexes' brand was built on public criticism of the monarchy, peaking with their devastating interview with Oprah Winfrey. Accusations of racism, institutional cruelty, and the withholding of titles dominated global headlines. Yet, when the crown passed to King Charles III in September of 2022, a fascinating shift occurred without a single word of protest. Under centuries-old royal protocols, Archie and Lilibet instantly became grandchildren of the reigning monarch, granting Lilibet the title of princess by birthright. What fascinated our investigators was the complete lack of fanfare that followed. The previous public wars over royal titles had been loud, emotional, and public. Yet, when the titles were finally granted, they accepted them in total silence. No press conferences, no explanations, and zero self-reflection on why they were eagerly accepting elite royal titles from an institution they had spent years painting as toxic and outdated. They rejected the family, but eagerly kept the brand. The hypocritical pattern surfaced yet again when Lilibet's christening took place in California in March of 2023. The ceremony was entirely private, stripped of the historic chapels, holy water, and centuries of royal pageantry that have defined these milestones in Britain for generations. No senior members of the royal family flew in, and the event took place thousands of miles away from the heritage tied to her name. On its own, it was just a private family choice. But through the analytical lens of Tom Bower and Lady Colin Campbell, it reinforced a calculated double standard, exploiting the prestige of the crown while refusing to show any loyalty to the institution itself. Harry and Meghan have always claimed they just wanted privacy, a defense many sympathetic observers accepted. But if true privacy was the ultimate goal, why did their choices constantly invite global speculation? Why did the massive chasm between their public victimhood narrative and their private thirst for royal status continue to fuel intense skepticism? Because you cannot sell privacy while selling your story to the highest bidder. Let's look at the core contradiction of their crusade. Every family has a right to privacy. No one believes that deeply personal family moments should be commodified for public entertainment. For years, the Sussexes built their entire legal and media campaign around the right to keep their private lives out of the spotlight. Yet, as Lady Colin Campbell has relentlessly argued, this royal war was never actually about privacy. It was about controlling which parts of their lives could be monetized, and which parts had to be hidden from scrutiny. To understand why this feud remains so toxic, we must return to the moment that changed global public opinion forever. In March of 2021, during their explosive sit-down with Oprah Winfrey, Meghan claimed there were disturbing discussions inside the palace regarding Archie's skin tone before he was born. The conversation instantly linked royal titles with institutional bias, implying race was the deciding factor in withholding security and status. The impact was nuclear. From London to Los Angeles, the narrative shifted from a family dispute to a global debate on identity, race, and survival. Lady Colin Campbell argues that this interview was a masterclass in narrative manipulation. Bower, however, focused strictly on the cold, hard facts. For him, the ultimate proof of their strategy came later during Lilibet's quiet California christening. By that time, due to the shift in succession, both children were officially prince and princess. Yet, the ceremony remained completely divorced from the Church of England and royal traditions, with zero involvement from the very institution whose titles they so eagerly slapped onto their children's birth certificates. This is the cornerstone of the investigators' argument. This is not just a simple charge of hypocrisy. It is a highly calculated, recurring business strategy. When royal status boosts their global brand, they embrace it. When royal duty requires sacrifice or compromise, they flee from it. No official press releases were issued, no primetime interviews were booked, and no public defense was launched, yet the silence itself was deafening. Why did Prince Harry and Meghan Markle choose absolute silence when the heat was turned all the way up? Was this a calculated media strategy, or did the meticulous evidence compiled by Tom Bower and Lady Colin Campbell leave them completely cornered with no way out? Let us uncover the truth behind the silence that is driving the Sussex camp crazy. Sometimes, saying nothing says absolutely everything. In the high-stakes game of public relations, there are moments when a total lack of response speaks louder than any expensive PR statement ever could. That was the suffocating atmosphere surrounding the explosive findings published by Tom Bower, a situation where the complete absence of a counter-narrative attracted far more scrutiny than a public fight ever would have. When these bombshell revelations hit the press, the world braced for an immediate, aggressive legal retaliation from Montecito. After all, this is a couple that has made a sport out of suing major media outlets. In 2021, Meghan achieved a massive victory against the Mail on Sunday over a leaked private letter to her father, proving that they have both the financial resources and the legal firepower to crush any publication that crosses them. That is exactly why their absolute silence in the face of Bower's book was so incredibly telling. Standard publishing protocol dictates that advanced manuscript copies are sent to targets before publication, leaving a wide-open window for legal challenges, factual corrections, or injunctions. Weeks passed, and the silence from the Sussex lawyers was absolute. Lady Colin Campbell points out that this silence carries an incredibly heavy legal significance. As Bower knows from decades of legal warfare, suing an investigative journalist in a court of law opens a dangerous door called discovery. To prove libel, you must submit to a grueling process of handing over private emails, text messages, and sworn testimonies under oath. In this arena, a lawsuit does not just silence a critic, it forces your deepest, darkest secrets directly into the public record. For seasoned observers, the lack of a lawsuit was not hesitation, it was pure survival. But there was another silence that raised even bigger questions. Buckingham Palace remained completely tight-lipped. This was highly unusual, as the royal households are master conductors of the media orchestra when they want to be. For nearly a century, damaging rumors have been quietly neutralized behind the scenes through off-the-record briefings or targeted press statements. This time, however, the palace did absolutely nothing to protect the Sussexes. They stood back and watched the flames rise. To Bower and Lady Colin Campbell, this hands-off approach was the ultimate confirmation. In this war, the story was not just defined by what was written, but by the devastating silence of everyone involved. While Prince Harry and Meghan Markle quickly dismissed these investigative books as absurd conspiracy theories and trashy royal melodrama, the reaction from the palace itself was far more telling. Why would an institution famously obsessed with protecting its global prestige choose total, unyielding silence? What did the royal family understand that the rest of the world missed? And how did that calculated silence completely reshape this entire conflict? Let's dissect the genius of the palace's silent warfare. To the Sussexes, Bower's book was nothing more than toxic fiction. Yet, the real masterstroke was not the allegations themselves, but the cold shoulder they received from the very monarchy they had spent years trying to dismantle. The palace, normally so precise in its communication, chose absolute radio silence. To veteran royal correspondents, that silence was a devastating tactical move. Both Tom Bower and Lady Colin Campbell have repeatedly highlighted a fundamental rule of palace warfare: when a scandal threatens the crown, the family acts swiftly behind closed doors. But when a narrative actively exposes the contradictions of their rivals, the palace simply steps aside and lets the public do the work for them. As the global debate raged, the public began to realize that the palace's silence was the ultimate indictment. The true damage of Bower's work was not just that it generated negative press. It did something far more lethal: it systematically dismantled the entire foundation of the Sussexes' global brand. For years, the world had been fed a highly emotional narrative of a young couple forced to flee royal cruelty to survive, delivered from their multi-million-dollar California estate in highly controlled, beautifully lit interviews. It worked because it felt raw and intensely personal. But instead of fighting emotion with emotion, Bauer brought receipts. He laid out names, dates, meeting logs, official titles, travel itineraries, and documented decisions side by side. Lady Colin Campbell echoed this clinical approach, proving that the reality was light years away from the simple victims versus evil institutions story the couple had sold. By the time public opinion began to permanently turn around the release of Bauer's book in 2022, the conversation had shifted completely. The question was no longer what the royal family had done to them, but how masterfully the couple had manipulated the very system they claimed to despise. In that quiet gap between raw facts and emotional marketing, a far more cynical story took hold, one that no Netflix deal or Oprah interview could ever fix. The daily tabloid headlines have long since faded, but a far more devastating war over basic credibility is still raging behind palace gates. Why has simple trust become the ultimate kryptonite for Meghan and Harry? And how did a series of calculated media moves leave them trapped in a web of contradictions that no multi-million-dollar streaming contract can save? Let's find out how the truth finally caught up with them. Long after the television cameras stopped rolling and the public moved on to the next scandal, a quiet crisis of credibility continued to rot the Sussex brand from the inside out, one that no flashy production deals or highly polished press releases could salvage. According to both Tom Bauer and Lady Colin Campbell, the ultimate tragedy of Harry and Meghan's post-royal life was never about lost security or cancelled contracts. It was about basic public trust, and the devastating fallout that occurs when your personal marketing campaign collides head-on with documented reality. When Spotify abruptly axed their multi-million-dollar partnership in 2023, the corporate PR machine blamed low content production and delivery issues. On the surface, it looked like a standard corporate restructuring. Yet, the industry reaction exposed a much darker truth. A chilling question began to echo through Hollywood: had the Sussex brand become toxic? Their massive commercial appeal was entirely dependent on the public believing their victimhood narrative. But as independent investigations, legal documents, and eyewitness testimonies began to paint a wildly different picture, that public trust evaporated. Lady Colin Campbell has repeatedly warned that emotional manipulation alone cannot sustain a global brand. Bauer analyzed this collapse with clinical coldness, treating their personal grievances not as holy scripture, but with the same aggressive scrutiny applied to corrupt political figures. This changed the game entirely. The world stopped asking what happened to them, and started asking if they had been lying to us the entire time. Hollywood, always ruthless in its survival instincts, reacted instantly. Projects were quietly shelved, reworked, or permanently delayed. While their Netflix projects still draw hate watches, the conversation has shifted from entertainment to intense skepticism. Journalists and media critics are now cross-checking every public claim against the hard evidence, creating an inescapable trap for the couple. It wasn't a sudden, explosive downfall, it was a slow, agonizing bleed of narrative control. Perhaps the most pathetic symbol of this decline occurred during a seemingly minor event, a simple birthday post. A message celebrating Princess Lilibet's 5th birthday appeared online with the comments completely turned off. To their remaining fans, it was a protective move. To critics like Bauer and Lady Colin Campbell, it was the ultimate white flag, a stark admission that they can no longer face the public without filtering the response. Years after their dramatic escape from the royal family, the war continues because the core questions have never been answered. They simply keep resurfacing, ensuring that this saga remains an unfinished tragedy. So, what do you think Tom Bauer and Lady Colin Campbell actually uncovered about Meghan's Lilibet saga that allegedly left Prince Harry completely blindsided? We want to hear your raw thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more unfiltered royal truths.